All right. Hey, welcome everybody to the Let's Talk About It Minot podcast. I'm your host, Rob Fuller, sitting here with Jonathan Starr again. Today we're going to talk about the Sentinel missile program that is going to be affecting Minot and North Dakota here shortly, just so everybody kind of has an idea of what it is and what we're looking at. And then I think as we discussed, we're going to leave whatever's left for questions about the city council meeting from the other night because as Jonathan said a minute ago, and I've heard from another few people, man, that was a doozy. A nice 5-hour meeting. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and answer some questions there. So anyway.
That's crazy. How you been doing?
I've been doing good. It's busy, trying to finish things up and kids. I'm Mr. Mom, as I spoke about before. When I get done here today, I got to go to the pumpkin patch with my 5-year-old, and I'm a chaperone out there for
That'll
that.
Be fun.
So it should be. Chasing kindergartners around though is it can be tough.
So you guys gonna do the corn maze and stuff like that?
I know this is through the school. I think my wife already had both the boys out there one time and they did the corn maze, but this is through the school thing now. And they asked us to stay away from the things that cost money and just go do the free stuff. So
There we go. Yep. Sounds like fun.
Yeah. So how about you? How you been doing this past week?
Well,
any big news in your life?
Big news. Dude, my life is full of scandal right now. We'll get through it. Did a little bit of moving the past week, so that's been
nice. Moving on up.
I'm getting old.
Yeah. Really? How old are you now?
I'm only 30. Okay, I'm very young.
Come talk to me in 20 years.
Exactly. But I'm starting to get to the place where you do stuff and you realize that you did something the next day. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
So I'm sore from moving. That's not something that used to happen. Yeah. And so adjusting to that. But lost not too much sleep, but last podcast I went and threw out, I guess, maybe a conspiracy theory that the administration was messing with the ports, and then 2 days after we recorded that, I think the ports were open. So they probably were scared of what we talked about and got them opened.
Well, I'm sure that was it. I'm sure they were listening to our podcast.
For sure.
And like, holy crap, those guys called us out.
It wasn't released yet, but they knew it was coming. So,
as I told you again when we were off camera, I think a lot of that was the head of the union for the port going, this won't look good for the Democrats if we do this. Let's go ahead and push it off until after the election. And I mean, funny how that works, right? Because I think if Trump had been in there or something like that, they wouldn't have stopped the.
Do you think the head of the union anticipated the president to use the clause that would have them work for 80 more days?
It had to be negotiated. There's no way. I think they have enough power that whether he anticipated, I think there was a little back and forth going on right after it happened, and they said, "Hey, let's do this because it gives us political cover and it gives you guys time we can negotiate and work on this." I don't believe in coincidences anymore. I'm getting too old. So
I'm struggling to believe in them as well. But
so what do you know about the Sentinel program?
Honestly, I know very little. I've had interviews with a couple people and they mentioned the Sentinel program and they talk about the amount of labor and housing and all this stuff that's going to be coming in and affecting Minot and the economic impact that's going to be happening. But we've never gotten to the ins and outs of what the Sentinel program actually is.
Okay. So I went out, because we knew we were going to talk about this, and I'm not a strategic missile defense expert, so I went out and did my research and got all this stuff. So basically, in a nutshell, just kind of let you know, the Air Force Sentinel program is a development project to replace the Minuteman III ICBM system with the next generation ICBM system, and it'll include a high-tech integrated weapons system that works in all 450 in-ground silos that already exist in the United States.
Wow.
So I believe that's North Dakota, Montana, and Wyoming are the three of them. So
the red zone.
The red zone, yeah. You remember as a kid when you used to see those, and maybe you guys did, and we saw them more during the Cold War. Oh, hey, if the United States is attacked by Russia, this is where they're going to get hit first. And it was Washington, D.C., and NORAD in Colorado, and then North Dakota's number 3, and you're like, why are they coming after us? You didn't understand.
What's the big deal?
We got a lot of missiles here.
Yeah,
so
we do.
But anyway, so what the Sentinel program will do, it'll modernize the land-based leg of the U.S. nuclear triad system. Obviously, the triad system is our nuclear deterrence or defense strategy in the United States here. involves the Air Force, the Navy with the submarines, and then the Air Force who controls the in-ground missiles.
Gotcha.
The 3 existing missile bases, as I spoke about, are Minot, which is the largest, Maelstrom in Montana, which is the second largest, and then F.E. Warren in Wyoming and Cheyenne, which is the smallest of the 3. All 3 of those places are going to basically have all of their computers, software, everything upgraded to digital, but unhackable in a type of analog way from what I've been able to read.
Interesting.
So, yeah, it is.
Probably about time then.
Well, if you think about it, our nuclear missile system, or our current system, went into the ground and into a lot of these places in the late 60s and early 70s. Like, so this technology, while it's been upgraded some, they've left it as antiquated as possible from everybody I've ever talked to, because they don't want it to be able to be hacked like everything else out there.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's kind of been their whole game plan. But
Yeah.
This is a whole different level of what they're going to actually do compared to what they've done over the last 50 years.
Right.
So the program itself started, it was estimated to cost $95 billion. Okay.
Billion.
That's been revised up.
It's almost a city budget right there.
So, close. But it's been revised up. The costs are coming in 37% over budget. Now, if you hear me talk, it's going to sound very similar to what I was saying the other night at City Council with regard to our flood control stuff.
Yes.
So now the projects or the pieces that have been bid are up at $125 billion, and the forecasted new estimate is $140 billion.
$140 billion.
So basically $141 billion to upgrade our nuclear defense.
Wow.
Yep.
That's crazy.
I mean, small project, right?
Small project.
So,
well, and the scope of our debt payment is pretty small, but that's crazy.
Yeah.
And so how many people is it going to bring to Minot? Do you know?
So I've seen 2 estimates. One of them was 1,500 to 3,000, and then the next one was 2,500 to 4,000 people, and that'll be workers and
military members probably too.
I'm sure there will be some military members. Most of this, though, the contract was awarded to Northrop Grumman. Northrop Grumman and some of the other smaller defense contractors that do stuff are all going to be actually working on it here in North Dakota. So it'll be a mix. Obviously, you have, from what I was reading, you have groups that follow these national military contracts around, right? You have contractors and you have laborers and you have, businesses that you're going to need that you don't have there before. And so we'll see all of that stuff showing up here in Minot. And I think that's why it's important, we're prepared for 5 to 7 years down the road as far as infrastructure wise, making sure we got lots ready to build on or already built on with we're waiting on homes, because 5 years goes pretty quick.
So it's going to start in 5 years?
5 to 7 years is the estimate, depending on delays. Again, as prices come in, I did read the other day when I was looking all this stuff up, they are talking about delaying some of the stuff because of the cost increase and overruns that they're doing.
Wow.
Or seeing.
Well, it's obviously a common conversation. You already mentioned flood control.
Yeah.
Same conversation had there. So it's interesting how conversations kind of repeat themselves at national levels, federal levels, and city levels.
It's kind of funny how they're mirroring things.
Right. Yeah.
And again, like we talked about at City Council, I realize that the flood control increases we're seeing here aren't just a local phenomenon. That's why I'm saying, or I had said, maybe we should pause this and let things cool down economically in this country, with inflation, with everything else, and just see what happens. I mean, it's not like we have to stop anything. And same thing with this, the U.S. government saying, hey, obviously we have to upgrade our missile system. But you know what? We might wait if it's going to cost us $15 billion less than it would have.
Right. And for some reason, I'm more concerned about them waiting on upgrading the missile system than us delaying flood control for some reason. And some people will be like, you're wrong for that. But hey, that's my fear. Water, we can all get over, but missiles, we won't get over.
One of those suckers lands, we're in trouble. So.
Right. Yeah. And this is probably the most important thing from this 5 years. We will increase the population, maybe some of it temporary, but by 3,000 people.
Yeah.
We're at 48,000. So say we had over the next 5 years, this isn't what history says, but say we increase by 1,000 people, 500 people each year, 500 people each year. So that puts us right above 50,000. This would get us to 53,000. That might be enough for Chick-fil-A because Grand Forks has 58,000.
Right, but Grand Forks put their Chick-fil-A in the college, in the student union.
Yeah,
right.
But they have a standalone location too.
Oh,
close to their mall.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, close to their mall, they have one too.
I mean, if that's the case,
and their mall's basically dead.
So, have you ever checked on franchising a Chick-fil-A in Minot? I mean,
so I had a friend that did.
Okay.
I think he checked on it in a different locale. It's really hard to become a franchise owner. In my understanding, it's low cost, but it's
around 80,000, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. But for like franchises, was a low cost. I think there's higher revenue share that they take their royalty or whatever it's considered in it. But you have to have a previous, I think basically they want you to have had worked in Chick-fil-A in some way before you become a franchise owner.
Oh, that makes a little sense. So you understand their whole way of doing things, I suppose.
It was something like that. And then it needs to be close to a mall, which we can satisfy that, but our mall's not much of a mall. But Grand Forks, honestly, like if someone's listening to me from Grand Forks, I'm sorry, but your guys' mall isn't much better than ours. So
the mall concept, I think, is dying, and especially as some of these big corporations take over and they jack rents up so high, you'd see people are like, not worth it, right?
Right.
So
probably not going to happen with the Sentinel project, but we are going to see an influx of people.
Yep.
So what about the amount of housing? Already, it seems like housing is a problem in Minot. So how is it going to affect housing?
Well, I think it's going to affect housing quite a bit. I mean, if we aren't ready, don't quote me on this because I'm going off just memory, and that's gotten poor as I've gotten older. But we talked about it at one of the city council meetings one night. Something like 1,300 lots available in North Dakota, and only between 250 and 400 of them are shovel ready, meaning they got infrastructure in and are ready to build.
So you said North Dakota, but are you meaning North Dakota?
Minot. Okay. Sorry, Minot.
1,300 in Minot, and then 200 to 300 that are actually ready to go.
Right. So again, if you have, let's use the low number. 2,500 people come in. If you have 2,500 people come in, we're going to be experiencing something similar to what happened right after the flood when the oil boom was kind of going off and we were short housing.
Right.
So what we need to do is, as a city, we need to get out of the way, help these builders and developers get these sections of land that are not shovel ready, get infrastructure in, paving, concrete, all that. So when the time comes, say, hey, the military notifies us, we'll be up there next year, August 2029.
Yes.
Perfect. We'll start building houses the year before. So we have some houses, whether they're rental homes or purchasable or whatever. But I mean, we're going to run out if we don't do something.
And the most likely the effect that it would have if we ran out of housing would affect more of the residents of Minot before and after the project than because the people that are paying for this project to happen are going to take into consideration okay, you guys are going to need a per diem per month or a housing allowance per month for housing. Oh, the rents just went up by $1,000. Okay, we get that. We'll budget that in, and they'll be fine. Yeah. But the person working at Walmart won't be.
Well, and that's exactly it. I mean, you're going to have a huge disparity within the population of who's affected more or less, because the person that could maybe go afford a $200,000 home with limited homes, now all of a sudden you have somebody that'll come in and pay $300,000 for that home. Well, these guys are out, and these guys are only going to be here 2 to 3 years, but they're setting that precedent in the market again.
Right.
My wife and I have joked, like, if we're not ready, we're going to turn our house into an Airbnb, go live with my parents for a few years and just collect rent,
make some money. That's not a bad idea. Not a bad idea. So go buy apartment buildings now.
Well, I mean, again, apartments are going to be huge, but you're going to have different levels of people that are up here, right? And I assume our hotels will be full again if we don't have this ready to go, the infrastructure in place and the home lots either available to build on or homes built ready to go. We're going to be in a similar situation to a few years ago.
When you say 2,500, is this, and you may not know the answer to this question because this is like drilling into that number, is that the amount of workers?
Yes.
So they could have family too, is what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
So
and I think that's why they say 2,500 to 4,000,
okay,
right?
Gotcha.
So
I see.
I think approximately the low end is just the workers show up, but then on the high end, the workers bring their families.
Yep.
And some of those people may ultimately, when the project is said and done, say, "Hey, we like Minot, we like this area, we're going to stay here." You know,
and that's the hard part about it. Just like we encountered with the oil.
Yep.
And there was a bust, but it wasn't as bad of a bust as it could be.
No,
but there was a small. Maybe some people felt it more. I mean, I was commenting about it with someone today because I did move this week, and the place that we bought, it was a condo, and like we bought in 15, and just a couple years later, it had lost $40,000 in value.
Yeah,
and this was an under $150,000 purchase.
Yeah,
so that was a huge drop in value, and now it's come up a little bit. But
and that's what you see obviously in the real estate market, right? But right now, they keep telling us there's a lot of pressure on the market in Minot, and you see that kind of in your assessed home values, and you see that. I have a friend who's a realtor, and I get an email from her every month that says this is what your home's value is in this zip code and everything like that, and you just continuously watch it go up, and you're like, that's not sustainable. Number one. Right. In the market, you can't just have this continuous rise, right?
It's either inflation or a boom.
Well, and that's just it, So again, what happens, that's where you got to be so careful, because as we talked about after the flood and the oil boom, we had overbuilt. Like, look at all the hotels that have failed and gone away or changed into other things. Now, housing, not so much, but it's a fine line you have to walk, right? Because then all of a sudden, let's say 10 years down the road, the Sentinel project is done. All the people that aren't staying here leave, and we got homes sitting everywhere, empty, hotels, apartments, all of that. So, I mean, it's such a fine line you have to walk, but you have to be ready for it. That's why you don't go build 2,500 new homes. You maybe go build 500 and then start the process.
Work itself out. So it's anticipated to go for about 10 years?
Well, I'm just saying 10 years. If they start here in 2029, I think they said the whole program should be somewhere between 10 and 12 years. And if they're starting here in 2029-ish, which I think might be, but I think 37 was when they anticipated the end date, was it? 2037.
So in a past life, for like a year of my life, I was a loan officer.
Okay.
Okay.
For who?
So... yeah, well, you might not want to know the answer to the question. Let's not go too far. But I was a loan processor for First International Bank and Trust as well. Great place to work. But you would go and you'd get those mortgages ready to go, and they'd be signing them as like 2041 is when it's due, 2039.
Yep.
And it's crazy to start talking about those numbers now,
right?
Of how we are actually is starting to get very attainable.
10, 12 years away. Yeah. You're like, oh, what happened to the last 10 years?
Yeah, it's crazy.
It is. So, question for you with our intercontinental ballistic missile system. How many different missiles has the U.S. developed over the last 70, 80 years?
Probably like one.
No, this is the new one, the ground-based strategic defense missile will actually be the sixth missile that we've developed. The Minuteman III was the fourth.
Okay.
That came about in the 70s. After that, they developed, if you remember the name, the Peacekeeper. They had the Peacekeeper missile for a little bit, and I think we had some of them deployed here in North Dakota.
So why do they name these missiles like they're so calm? It's the Peacekeeper.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they're just trying to lull everybody into a sense of, hey, it's all okay because if these start flying, we're safe. Not really.
Not really.
So yeah, I mean, it just I thought that was kind of neat. I didn't know we developed 6 different missiles.
And that's crazy. And I don't know if I actually believed one, but the reason I said that is because it seems like our bombers, which I think they have tried other deals, but it seems like the tried and true B-52s that are ancient are the ones that are still holding. Yeah. It's crazy to think that we'll have aircraft that has been around for as long and been in so many or been involved in other wars would be part of World War III whenever that does happen.
Well, it is amazing that you have an airframe that's roughly, I believe it was developed in the late 50s, early 60s. So I mean, we're talking 80 years old, and they keep upgrading the thing, and it continues to be the leader in strategic defense, air-based at least.
Yeah, B-52 first flew in 1954. This is according to AF.mil, so that should be pretty close to accurate.
next year will be 90 years then. No, 70 years. 70 years.
70 years. That'd be this year's 54. This is 4. So
sorry, I'm a year off.
70 years.
Yeah. See that old thing, Ed? So
it's crazy.
It is. So, but I mean, it's a huge project, obviously for our country, but for Minot, North Dakota as well. Like what it's going to bring here, tax-wise, sales tax-wise, even property tax-wise is going to be pretty astounding. Now, if Measure 4 passes and there are no property taxes, that'll change a little bit. But
doesn't that make you sick, all that lost revenue right there?
Not really, because, again, the state is going to find a way to make it up. And no, they're not going to raise the personal income tax to 12%. And no, they're not going to do some of these other things. They're going to put a flat tax out there. I'm so tired of the scare tactics from everybody. They know exactly what they're going to do. They just have to get rid of the property tax by assessed value portion. They can do a property tax on a flat mills on the square foot or whatever other alternative.
So somebody commented after the last video that it's unfair, respectfully. There's somebody that was engaged, so I'm not mocking them, but they were saying that it's unfair to go from this current tax system to a flat tax system. But can you explain what you mean by flat tax?
Sure. So a flat tax system is they pick a number. Let's say it's 21 mills. And I don't know why I've heard that a couple times, but let's say it's 21 mills. They come up with the mill is the same for everybody across the state. Okay. 21 mills is what we need. So Jonathan Starr, who owns 8,000 square feet of land that his condo sits on, will pay 21 mills against that 8,000 square feet. Mm-hmm. Rob Fuller, who owns, I believe my lot is like 12,300 square feet, who owns 12,300 square feet, will pay 21 mills against that. The building that I own out there that Spartan Firearms was in, I will pay whatever, I think that's an acre and a half. Yeah. But I will pay 21 mills against that square footage. And Farmer Joe, who lives out in wherever, North Dakota.
North Dakota.
And they will pay 21 mills against the 43,000 or whatever it is, 45,000. I forget what the square footage of an acre is off the top of my head, 45 something. But they will, not an acre, but a quarter of land, the square footage of a quarter of land. Anyway, they'll pay the same 21 mills against that. Okay, so everybody pays the same amount. The big thing that's significant about that is currently, and I'm going to pick on the farmers. And again, I love the farmers. My family has farmed their whole life. I grew up around it. But a quarter of land, which again is assessed at somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000 and produces maybe $100,000 worth of income a year, they will pay $700 to $900 in property tax on that. That's significantly less than me personally is paying. And people say, oh, well, you live in town. But what everybody has to remember is all those people from out in the rural areas come to our towns and they use the infrastructure and they use everything to get their groceries and their needs and everything else, So they come into town and they use a lot of what we're paying for. Right. And again, I'm not asking that they pay more than their fair share and I pay less. I'm just saying, if they do that, now all of a sudden, instead of paying $700 or $800 on that quarter, they're going to have to pay $9,000 on that quarter. That's pretty significant change. And then you go to their home quarter, and again, not picking on anybody, but you drive by these farmsteads anymore with these home quarters, and they got $1 million homes on them, and they got $400,000 or $500,000 in buildings and grain bins and everything else, and you see $10 million of machinery sitting there. Yeah. And because they farm that quarter of land and it's their homestead, they don't have to pay any tax on it. Right. Why? Yeah. I mean, again, we're just trying to say if that's the route they go, that evens it out and makes it fair across the board to everybody. We're all paying the same thing on the same amount or on the amount of land we own. And if you choose to buy more land, then you just know you have to pay more tax for that.
So what a flat tax is not $1,000 that everybody has to pay because they own a piece of property, whether you have 1,000 square feet of land, which would be way undersized, or 100,000 square feet of land. Yes. It's just a flat mill rate that is based off the square footage of land rather than the assessed value of your land.
Correct. And I've heard, well, you can do it based off the square footage of the land. You could do it based off the square footage of the home.
Yeah.
Whatever route
Whatever
they
the
decide
metric
to go.
Yeah.
But,
so hopefully that clears, because I believe that there's still a lot of fairness in that. There's not an unfair side of it. If it was truly a deal where everybody just paid the same amount of property tax, that would be unfair.
well, yes. I mean, somebody like your $1,000 example,
Yeah.
you paying $1,000 and me paying $1,000, that's very unfair, right?
Right.
I mean, especially on like my commercial building.
Yep.
But a fair flat rate against whatever square footage you own is pretty fair across the board. It changes things as to how it is, but it evens it out across the state more. And so everybody, and I don't know if this is true. Again, I haven't checked into it. I think I said this before. I read somewhere that the estimate is if you were to do something like that and they didn't give the flat rate number, they didn't say it was 21 mils. So I don't know if that's it. But if you did that, you would collect almost double the property tax in North Dakota. So that shows you how little the farmers actually have to pay compared to the rest of us.
That's not that our rates would go up substantially. There's a lot of people that have exemptions of some type.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that you get breaks, and again, I don't want to just hammer on the rural folks, but if I had a building that was valued at $500,000 and producing $100,000 in income a year, and I only had to pay $900 in tax, I'd be pretty darn happy.
Yeah, right.
So
and this isn't what we're really intending to talk about today, but it also, we talk about the farmers getting their exemption. This is why people were so fired up about TIFs, is because the way that the property tax works is you guys are going to say, hey, we need $24 million in property tax or whatever that's going to be given to the county, and the mill is going to be distributed, and we're going to get our property tax bills. If somebody, and we'll use Big M as an example, if they don't have to pay $500,000 or however much it would be in property taxes for a few years, that's, $500,000. That, when you think about 24 million, you think about 500,000, you can see how that's a big number, and that affects every single person. Everybody else has to pay a little bit, so that way Big M can be all right.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, and that's while TIFs are good, in my opinion, for certain developments or fill-ins in kind of urban areas, using them as your main source of stipending the economic development is not the way to go about it. You can use them for that, but like we did the TIF down on the Maverick building down there across from Trinity. Why?
Right.
What portion of that is
blighted.
Fill in or blighted or anything like that?
Yeah.
So, but
absolutely.
Anyway, going back to the original question with the property tax thing, back to the Sentinel program.
Yeah, right.
Just imagine though, if we don't have property tax in Minot, North Dakota, when this comes here, and all these businesses that follow these government contracts around can come in here, and it may incentivize more people, more businesses to come here. I mean, imagine, we've talked about Costco and Chick-fil-A all these times. Imagine if North Dakota got rid of the property tax, at least in the sense that we have it now. How much business could we get to come to Minot, North Dakota? I think we could get a lot of it to come up here. Maybe not your Chick-fil-A, but you never know. We could get the Who Hot my brother's always talking about or whatever.
Maybe I should ask you.
Okay.
Have you looked at franchising of Chick-fil-A?
I have not.
I'm kidding.
I have not. I know a little bit about it because my brother at one time was looking at franchising a restaurant, and he had come down to, I think, Chick-fil-A and Who Hot were his two big ones, and he'd done some research, and Chick-fil-A had just basically said, no, we're not interested. The metropolitan thing is not big enough. Yeah.
And I say it's interesting that Grand Forks is, but I think that population that we see is just the North Dakota side, might not be East Grand Forks too.
Well, and it doesn't include the college, right? The 53,000 is
probably not.
Yeah, I mean, you got to add they got another 15,000 kids for the college or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, across the river over there in East Grand Forks.
Right.
So
it's bigger than what we're giving it credit for.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Well, it'll be interesting to see what the Sentinel project, the effect that it actually has on Minot.
Absolutely. So we're done with the Sentinel project. Then you want to move right on to the city council stuff. I can see it.
You can see it. So, do you guys have fans up there? Do you have cushions in your chairs? How do you survive for 5 hours?
If you watch me, where I sit over there is right under the AC vent, and I can't wear short sleeves in there anymore. I was freezing the other night. Like I was sitting over there, like thinking in my head, you'll see me in a couple times turning my head like, where's the thermostat? Can we turn the thermostat down?
That's hilarious. They're trying to freeze you out. That's on purpose.
They gave you that and I looked to my left, and Mark Janser has his sport coat on. And I was like, he knows.
Yeah.
And Steph Stahlheim has a long sleeve, I believe, sweater on. Harold has his sport coat on. Tom has his sport coat on. I'm like, oh, so nobody gave us the message. Here I sit in short sleeves and the AC is just blowing. But I mean, in all honesty, when you're engaged, when you're interested in what's going on, it's not hard to sit there and listen. Right. Some of it gets a little mundane, and some of it you feel bad about. The Mr. Kolobakin coming up and talking about his homes again. That's a heartbreaking situation, and it's very hard as a city council member to sit there and say, hey, I'm okay with tearing your house down, but at some point you just have to rip the Band-Aid off, as we say. He's had a lot of time and a lot of interaction with the city, and while I understand he was trying, but things like that get tough to sit through when they take extended periods of time.
Seems like there's decent amount of discussion on that.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. So there's no secret trick. It's just staying engaged. That's how you endure a 5-hour city council meeting.
Well, let me ask you now. You're talking about. Are you guys? Everybody before was always so unbelievably. Although those meetings are so fast, but no questions ever got asked. Are you guys upset now that we're asking questions?
I'm just terribly upset. I'm kidding. People try to tell me that I'm part of the media. I don't know if I believe that or not. But if I am, I love it because there's a ton of stuff to talk about.
Absolutely.
So how could I be upset? No, I have said, and I stand by it, because at first there were conversations of they're short, but then there was conversations of them being long. But it came down to, as those conversations developed more, it came down to them being inefficient. That was more the frustration I think that was happening.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So it feels like now there's a lot of questions that are being asked, and it brings a lot of transparency to the people of actually what's going on. I mean, there was a decent amount of discussion on the Magic Fund.
Yeah.
And I think if you just ask people what the Magic Fund is, they would say it's a fund that just gets money and is never used. And of course that has changed, but there's just a perception, and there's never like a full understanding. Nobody's going and reading the deal that Brecca and Harold put together and understanding it from that point of view, unless it really matters to them. They're trying to use the funds or something.
Well, like with that one specifically, Mike brought up changing how much goes into one of the buckets. Now they changed it from last year into this new bucket system, and the way I think we'd all understood it was when one bucket is full, the money then that would go into that bucket will just flow to the next bucket.
And they tried to say, no, it doesn't automatically flow.
Well, and again, they said you can move the money around to any bucket from any, with the exception of the first bucket that goes up to 10 million. Primary sector. Thank you. So while I understand that, I think ultimately we have almost 10 million. It's just under 10 million in the primary sector budget. Or a portion of that, because we haven't been using the money that goes into the Magic Fund effectively over the last 5, 6, 7 years, whatever time frame you want to call it. So we changed it last year, and now they got money going into the third bucket, which is the infrastructure and facade program and everything like that. And ultimately, I think what we have to do as a community is sit down and talk about that 2.1 million that every year comes out of that sales tax penny and goes into these buckets, because ultimately we're not using them the way they were intended to be used when it was originally voted on back in the day. So maybe what we need to do now is say, okay, we're going to stop. We're going to have a community talk here. We're going to stop funding this with this sales tax penny, and we're going to use that sales tax penny every year, or that portion of that sales tax penny, to buy down property tax, because there is another portion in there for property tax where we could just add this to that. I think ultimately people in this community would be happier seeing that 2.1 million every year go to buy down property tax rates than going into these other funds where the money is just sitting there and not being used, or we go out and spend $800,000 on wayfinding signs. I mean, I think some of that stuff ultimately has to change.
Right. So I have the buckets here.
Okay.
It goes to the primary sector.
Yep. And then the matching funds one.
Yep. Let me read this part. Magic funds may be transferred from one program to another after receiving approval from a supermajority of the city council. Mm-hmm. Funds may be requested from bucket 2 to bucket 3. However, transferred primary sector funds, which is bucket 2, may not be transferred to another fund. So it can only be transferred once, is what I understand from that.
Well, I think, I hear that differently. So what they're saying is if the money that came into bucket 2 came from bucket 1,
okay,
you can only transfer it into bucket 1. You can't continue to transfer it down the line.
Okay.
Is that maybe what they're saying there?
You probably know better than me.
That would be the way I would take that, but...
Okay. Or funds may be requested from bucket 3 to another program, or funds may be requested from any program to bucket 2, which is the primary sector bucket. So bucket 2 is primary sector, bucket 3 is state match.
Hold on, isn't bucket 1 primary sector?
So they probably have their graphic wrong.
Oh, because I thought
this is straight
1
from
was
the city.
primary sector, 2 was the matching funds, 3 was the facade.
Look at it and tell me where they're wrong. This is on record madness. I think they do. I think they have 3 on there twice, right?
They do.
So 1 is supposed to be, and that's part of the reason why it wasn't making fully sense.
Yeah.
So
1 is primary sector,
one
which
is primary
is the
sector.
$3 to $10 million bucket.
Right.
2 is the matching funds for the tax incentives the state program through the Bank of North Dakota, like the rate buy downs and those types of things, the flex program. 3 is the facade and Renaissance and that, and then I don't remember what the other 2 were.
So 3 would be City of Minot Economic Development Projects, which is what you're saying, the facade. 4 would then be small business, and then 5 is flood control.
Yeah.
And as I read it even further, they might be thinking 1 is actually Magic Fund. I don't know. The graphic, honestly, I'm sorry, City of Minot, but it's a little bit confusing. But it does help.
Night too. It was a little messed up. Not a big deal.
It's all right. Nonetheless, we see how the buckets work. They're transferred. The money kind of overflows, keeps everything filled. So interesting discussion on that. At this point, not even sure where I was originally going.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get you off on a tangent. No, I mean,
it's not your fault.
I think ultimately the concern that you're seeing from some of us, not everybody, but from some of us with this is the funds aren't being used the way that we were always intended to use them, right? And in the beginning, I think the Magic Fund program was used, but they haven't even had a meeting in over a year from some of the people I've talked to that are on the board, to dole out money. So, again, is it time to maybe revamp it or relook at it, restructure more so than what they did last year with the buckets? Yes, because that money just going into a bucket for the facade program or the Renaissance program, while that's a great, I suppose, idea, isn't fair to everybody else in the community because they only use it in certain areas and certain parts of town. And so only certain people benefit from it.
So the facade program either needs to be opened up for all small businesses or it should be shut down.
Maybe not shut down, maybe lowered. If we talk about it, I believe we give out $100,000 for the facade program, and we have a certain level of requirements. Mandan has a similar program, and I believe they only give out $30,000.
Okay.
Maybe again, that program can be there, but do we need to give out the amount that we're giving out? Right. When we could be using it for other things that may benefit the community a little more.
So should there be a small business is so broad, especially in North Dakota, right? It feels like, because there's not very many big businesses in North Dakota other than the outside corporations that come in.
Yep.
Dots Pretzels would have been a corporation that was North Dakota, and there's others, but when you look at like the actual terms of what a small business is, there's a lot of employees you can have and still be considered a small business.
Absolutely.
Should there be like revenue? Should there be a look taking at revenue to see if that's a qualifying factor for people?
How much you bring in versus how much you're going to get from us type thing?
Yeah. Because
I think that's a great idea.
Because it seems, and even looking, like there's some small businesses that probably can't spend the money to update their facade. And then there's other businesses that are just, hey, we could do this, but we might as well get the free $100,000.
Absolutely. And that's what a lot of what is going on now. Like the ones we looked at the other night, I wouldn't say that's it, but some of the other facade program improvement things that have happened down there, some of those companies are doing pretty good, and we're giving them $100,000, and and I believe some of them are getting the Renaissance stuff as well. So I mean, I think, yeah, if your business did this good last year, maybe you're not eligible for it again. Right. If you have the money to do it yourself, why do we need to borrow it to you and give you tax breaks and everything else?
And it's not like an uncommon thing. If you go look at mortgage loan programs, since we've already brought that up, I mean, you have an FHA program that is based off of the average income in your area, of whether or not you can qualify. So
yeah, I mean, if you're over a certain amount, you don't get that.
You don't get that.
And I mean, that's pretty prevalent throughout the whole economic world, right? When you're looking for assistance or things from the government, state, or city. So
all right, city council meeting.
Okay.
What's the top 3? And I asked people on Minot Talk this question, but it's to you, it's gonna be a little bit different. What did you feel like the top 3 successes were as you get to the end of this budget? Looking back over the process, obviously there's still a little more work to be done, but it's coming to a close.
So specifically with the budget, the top 3 things?
Yeah, because there was a lot talked about at Minot City Council meeting, and we can talk about some of the other stuff that happened for the budget conversation, but yeah.
So I think in my mind, the top 3 things that we were able to do is, number 1, give back $3.6 million to the taxpayers in property tax buy down, even though the other night a couple of the members tried to back that out, and walk it back, which was surprising to me. But so number 1, in my mind, that's number 1. Number 2, I think getting the city employees as much as we could and not changing their insurance package and everything like that. I think that was a very big win as well. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more personally, because again, we were talking about $1.1 million. And if we can't cut that from someplace other than the employees' salaries, I'm shocked with a $228 million budget.
Yeah.
And 3, I don't think was a specific, but I think just as a whole, I think we were able to bring a little bit of transparency to the budget system that people didn't see or hear before, because there was never questions asked, and there was never a lot of dialogue, and there wasn't, maybe we should look at our alternative routes. It was, this is what the city wants. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think those are my big top 3 things.
It's interesting to hear the conversations change. Like
it
on
is,
that last
it?
one, this is what the city wants. Even with Councilman Samuelson's motion to defund the chamber EDC.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, probably the people viewing city council felt like that was probably a blow from left field, right? Didn't see it coming. But then Brecca mentioned there was a phone call the previous week. She probably had an idea that maybe something was coming down the pipe. And this is internally probably not something that was a shot out of left field. But you start to have conversations of, hey, I mean, we're giving out this money.
Yeah.
But just understand we're giving you the money.
Don't you think, the 47,000 people that live here in Minot have some of those same questions, but they don't feel like they ever get answered because nobody was ever saying anything. And now Scott goes, hey, and Scott has been very open about where he stands on the Measure 4 thing. So, that's perfectly fine. He hasn't been hiding anything or anything. But what I think his major concern is look, and when I got my chance to speak, I brought this up. Yes, we give $560,000 a year, or plus the 75 for Task Force 21. But so we give that money every year to them to run the Magic Fund and do everything. Now, if you go out into the community and you see Minot Chamber or Minot Chamber EDC, are they distinguishable as different entities?
No, not now.
No, they never have been. I don't believe they ever have been.
Well,
honestly.
they were, and you're still making your point. But the only thing I'd add is at one point they were separate entities.
Correct, but I meant since they brought them both under the chamber umbrella.
Gotcha. No, since they brought them together, no,
they're not indistinguishable, and I think that's what Scott was saying is like, hey, whether you guys say you separate them out and the funds aren't this and the funds aren't transferred between and everything else, the city of Minot does not see it that way.
Right.
You are one in the same entity, and you took all this money from us, and then what you did was you gave $5,000 to the group that's mainly made up of out-of-state entities, or that's where the majority of their funding is coming from. You gave $5,000 to the Kill North Dakota, Keep It Local group, and said, hey, we're with you. We don't think this is a good idea. Now, one of the questions I asked, and then one of the questions Mike asked, number one, I said, you guys are made up of 80 or 90 members. Did you ask the members, the other businesses in this city, how they felt? Brecca did not answer the question.
There's not a direct answer to it.
Then Mike said, hey, Rob asked you a question and you didn't answer it. Did you talk to those guys? And then I think Mike said, what about everybody else in this town who is affected by how high property taxes are? How do you think they all felt about it?
Right.
And again, not direct answers, but and I know it's a hard spot for Brecca. I understand that. I know Brecca outside of the city council stuff, and so I realize that's a tough spot to be in. But those are questions that we have to ask, and the fact that Scott brought it up and the way he brought it up, like you said, was shocking to a lot of people. But I think it's also shocking to a lot of people that the chamber EDC put out where they stand on a measure that was driven from the people in this city, in this county, and in this state. Yeah. I agree with Scott 100%. They should be keeping their mouths shut and staying on the sidelines and just watching what happens.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, that's a tough one because we talked about it. First off, if it was to actually happen, where they were defunded, I don't think there was ever an expectation that it was actually going to be defunded.
No, I don't think so. And Scott even said, he goes, I didn't bring it up thinking anybody would honestly vote to do this, but I wanted people to understand.
Just like he pulled one of the, can't think of them, but pulled it in to honor the firefighters. So he was just making a few points, and we appreciate it, Scott. But what would Minot look like without the chamber EDC being connected to the city? Like, do you see them, and this is going to put you on the spot a little bit, do you see them as being something that is a little bit fundamental to the city, or is it something where if we pulled that money, we could probably do it internally?
Well, honestly, I think, at least in my opinion, I think, so we have the city of Minot doing economic development, and we have the chamber EDC doing economic development.
Economic development, city Minot, that's Brian Billingsley and a little bit of his area, right?
Well, yes. I mean, that's his area, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
But at times they're not on the same page. And so first, let me say, I think there needs to be some coordination between the two, at least for economic development in the city of Minot. Now, in my mind, the chamber is doing 30,000 foot economic development, right? They're kind of doing the stuff that I believe Shane
the fun stuff,
right? They're talking to the big corporations, and they're talking to the Task Force 21 people about the Sentinel program and stuff like that. They're up here in
Seattle with the ports out there,
that sort of thing. So I mean, how do I look at what they do? I would like to see, in my opinion, again, I would like to see some more, and I think what they do is important,
right? But
I would like to see some more local stuff happening here in the community. How do we drive and spur that growth that we want? And I know they would say, well, us talking to these companies coming to North Dakota, well, I get that. You reach out to 30 companies a year, and 20 of them say, no, we have no interest. 5 of them say, yeah, we might be interested. And 5 of them say, yeah, we're thinking about it.
Yeah.
Well, have you looked at Minot, right? I mean, those things have to happen, but how do we get to where we get the Circle K? Why isn't the chamber doing something to help push getting this Circle K gas station done?
Right.
I mean, those are things that I would think would be more beneficial with our dollars that we give them.
Even well, Circle K is a good example, but I think a good example as well is Northern Plains Ag, where we've mentioned it before. They're told, go build out of town.
Right.
Like it seems like they would be defending them a little bit.
Well, again, you and I'll just say it. You hear the chamber step up and say, hey, we're against Measure 4. Yeah. How come you don't hear our Chamber Economic Development stand up and say, hey, why are we pushing against these? Why are we telling these guys? You don't hear any of that stuff. It makes you kind of wonder, what is their economic development other than the 30,000 foot level?
Yeah.
So
very interesting there.
Yeah. All right. So what's your next one?
Yeah. Let's see. Let's go through it. The there's some good conversation that was happening on flood control. Maybe we should just stop flood control, Rob. Maybe we should just stop.
All right, let's go.
Is that what the solution is? Just stopping flood control?
No, and if so, I had pulled. Oh no, that was something else that I pulled. Sorry, that was a consent item that I just wanted to ask about. But so we got to action item. I believe it was 7.6, which was the MI6 flood control portion, and I started off by saying, hey, this is another portion of our flood control. And I talked to a couple of the city guys after the meeting, just because I wasn't sure. We've had 4 pieces of flood control that are done, and we have about 9 pieces that are left. Okay.
Yeah.
Now the pieces that were done, a couple of them did come in under budget, but these weren't $39 million budgets. They were a little bit smaller budgets. So it wasn't like we had the savings we're seeing in these excesses we're seeing now. So anyway, the very first words out of my mouth was, I am in no way, shape, or form stating that we should stop all of our flood control initiatives.
Yeah.
Very first thing I said, because I knew that was what people were going to hear. And I am not saying we need to stop it. But again, if you take the numbers, just the round numbers that I used, our flood control program is $1 billion. If it balloons 30% to $1.3 billion, our share of the original was $350 million as a community. We are paying $12 million a year back right now against these bonds. If it goes to that next 30% boom, we are going to pay $472.5 million. So our share goes up $122 million. We cannot absorb that as a community and for our future generations.
Right.
Now, I understand that upsets people. I understand that upsets people in the city. I understand that upsets people at like Ackerman Esvold and the Surrey River Joint Board. I understand that upsets people in the valley. But here's my question, and I was going to say this the other night when ex-mayor Sitma got up there and started yelling at me. But his major concern...
It was a good discussion, wasn't it?
It was. But he was angry. And, and that's why I just backed off. But I'll get into that in a second. Yeah. So here's my thing. He gets up there and he rattles off all these numbers on flood control, flood insurance and what it's going to cost the people in the valley and everything else, right? 17,000 people. And he kept looking at me talking about optics because I had used that note earlier when I was talking to Brecca. Well, what I wanted to say to him, and I didn't, because again, he was just flame throwing at me, right? Yeah. Trying to, and I think I understand he's upset and he's stressed and he's worried about it, right? I like I've said before, when we're sitting up there and people get up and talk, I realize that what they're talking about is the most important thing in their life right at that moment, and I can empathize with that to some degree. But he's like 17,000 people, flood insurance premiums, going off. What I wanted to say was, Sean, I realize you're concerned with the 17,000 people in the valley, but what about the other 30,000 people in the city of Minot that you are asking to pick up and pay for all of this?
Yeah.
Don't you think we deserve to do the due diligence and the best that we can, fiscally responsible for these people, so you don't have to pay those flood insurance premiums?
Yeah.
But, again, that's lost when somebody's angry and they're worried about, he wants to stop flood control and I'm going to have to pay more insurance. And I'm not saying that, but it will not hurt us to slow it down, to bring it back and say, as a community, maybe we don't need to spend $1 billion. Maybe we only need to spend $800 million. And yes, the flood insurance premiums would go up a little bit, but not as much as if we do nothing. Or maybe we see pricing come back to normal in the next 2 to 3 years.
Is this whole flood insurance, and we've had conversations about this on Minot Talk, is this whole flood insurance thing just leverage?
Well, I
get there's some reality to it.
There is.
But it seems like if I was just somebody that was taking everything at face value off of what I've heard, this would be my understanding. If we don't spend $350 million, now going up to $472 million, then we have to pay insurance. It's not that in some areas we are going above and beyond. In some areas we're doing better than what we need to. It's just if we don't spend that money, then the flood insurance premiums are going to go up dramatically and people won't be able to afford it.
I think the flood insurance premiums are going up regardless from what I understand. And I think what Sean was saying the other night. They're going up regardless. That they've already put that into place at this time, and we have the ability, if we spend this money, to pull some of the homes in the valley out of being a part of that. And that again would be another question that I would ask. So let's say these flood premiums go into place, and we've slowed it down. We haven't stopped it, but we've slowed it down. And so for a couple of years, a number of homeowners have to pay a little bit higher premium. But because we didn't do it right away, and we, our bids now, maybe 3 years from now, are starting to come in back normal where they were instead of $13 million over budget.
Yeah.
Now we do that flood control project, and in 5 years, those people are pulled out and they don't have to pay those high premiums anymore. Is that so much to ask for the other 30,000 people that you're asking to pick up and lift and pay this? And that was what I was trying to get at, but he didn't want to hear any of that. He didn't want to, think past what about us and our flood insurance premiums,
Yeah, it's interesting. Very interesting conversation there. I don't know how I feel about that. Because like you said, it seems like a lot of decisions are made that are impacting the small amount of people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is all done for the benefit of 17,000 people, as Sean said, if that number is correct, that live in the valley, right? The 17,000 homeowners.
So a third of Minot.
Yeah, roughly a third.
And in the stuff that we have done so far does not help any of them. Well, and I get it's one of those deals where
there's 3 phases,
I can
right?
go build a garage and it doesn't give me a house. Like you're going to need the whole thing, right?
Well, you're going to need, as you get each phase done, there was phase 1, I believe we're in phase 2 right now, and then there's phase 3, which is the down end stuff on the east side of town. What we're seeing right now, the stuff that we're bidding, is the middle of town stuff where the most people are going to be pulled out. And again, I'm not suggesting we stop.
So let me put it this way, because I think this is where I struggle with it.
Okay.
I think this will showcase it best. What I struggle with is we're always told this stuff in big picture. But then when the Kemper property hits the market, we saved $40 million by purchasing it.
No, we could save $40 million. I will believe that when I see it. And that was kind of the similar thing the other night. I kept saying to Sean, quit throwing out the scare tactics, because that's all you're doing. You're up here, regurgitating a bunch of numbers that are going to happen, and you don't know what's going to happen in 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years.
Right.
So,
but that's it.
Yeah.
Because we, as the citizens are said, if it's not done to this $350 million quality, then insurance rates are going to go way up.
Right.
Well, what does way up mean?
Yeah.
How much does it you're saying if we only spent $300 million and we cut out some of that stuff, then it's going to go
all or nothing.
Yeah, it's all or nothing. That's what I'm getting at. And if we just save $42 million or $40 million, then how doesn't that $350 million decrease somehow?
Well, you would think it would. But again, because that's, let's talk about it like the Kamala tax, that if she gets elected, she wants to put into place on unrealized gains.
Yeah.
Right? That's an unrealized savings. That savings is potentially in 3 to 10 years, somewhere in there. Now, let's just play a game here and say that a Democrat gets elected again and inflation doesn't go away and our country keeps spiraling. Do you think we're going to see a $40 million savings when we go to do that portion of the project? Absolutely not. And so I'm tired of playing the what ifs games. Yeah. What if this happens? What if this doesn't happen? What if, what if? Let's focus on the here and now. You are asking people to pay $13 million more, and our share of that would be $5 million over. Do we not owe it to every person in this town who is picking up and paying this debt that we do it to the best of our ability and at the best pricing we can get?
Absolutely.
Right.
That's why.
But nobody wants to talk about that, right? Let's just get it done. Let's just get it done and push it through and push it through. I would be heartbroken that if, and I think I said it the other night, right now we have flood control bonds out at 30 years. If this balloons to the 1.3 billion, our flood control bonds will go out to 40 years. It'll be another 10 years added to that. So my kids, your kids, grandkids are going to be paying for these bonds 50 years into the future. And I'm like, that is so irresponsible of us as number one, as a community, and as a generation. Like, I get how devastating the flood was. I understand it. Sean, when he got up there, wanted to, I watched people die, and, they want the empathy and the sympathy, and I get it. We all understood and understand how devastating the flood was. We're seeing it again with what's happening in Florida and North Carolina and these other places. But I will not hamper the future generations and community in Minot while I sit on this council, putting them into a debt that they may never, ever get out of. And again, may never, ever have to worry about, because we are preparing for something that is supposed to happen once every 100 to 500 years. And I would argue the last one wouldn't have happened the way it happened if the Army Corps of Engineers would have been doing their jobs correctly with the garrison, or with the dam.
So whatever it's called.
So you can always play the what if game, right? Yeah. But we can't continue to absorb this as a community.
So this isn't directly tied to this, but there's a little bit. Councilman Samuelson said a couple times, or at least one time, I don't feel like I should be obligated to carry on something that a previous council voted on.
Yep.
And personally, I agree with that in a framework. But if you did buy a business, there are contracts that you're obligated to. Matter of fact, when we took over the Dakota a year and a half ago, we had a relationship with AP at the time, but we weren't supposed to use images. They used 2 images, and I was given the opportunity to give some attorney out in Las Vegas $1,000 because we used 2 images before I owned it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because, and I told them I wasn't the owner then. They're like, we don't care. You're the owner now, right?
Right.
There are some things that are just carried over because you're now part of it. You have to fulfill those obligations, even though you never wanted to meet them. And I feel like there is a measure of that at the city too. Like, all right. And we could talk about the facade program, but I'm not trying to take shots at Scott and how he voted on something. I'm just asking in general, is that something, like, how do you approach that more?
Well, and that's tough because, I think one of the times he brought that up was when I pulled the consent item for the 16th Street rebuild and the 2 detention ponds they want to put in over there, right?
Yeah.
And I asked Lance, I said, help me understand this. I don't remember approving this. Well, it was approved in May before us, and I think I understand your point, whereas if you buy a business, there's certain things you're stuck with. But what you see in government all the time is one administration or one Congress or whatever changes the things that the previous one did. I mean, that's pretty much commonplace. So being tied to some of the decisions that were made before, because again, I'm just going to use these retention ponds. Never in my life do I remember Burdick and 16th Street, and I know it's complicated with the hydraulic engineering and where we need to move this water and that
costs
water
lots of money
like
to figure it out.
But I mean, do we need to put $30 million retention ponds to the what would that be? West side of Burdick, right by Finch, Spartan Finch. It's a $30 million lift, $23 million of it, or Lance said the other night, I think he said it was actually $12 million, but we got to pay 30% of that again. Okay. 30% of that is on the city. So we got to come up with like $4 million or whatever the number is. And so we don't have that money. And that's what I was kind of getting at earlier. If we don't tie those sales tax pennies that are being used for flood control right now, to all these bonds in the future, imagine what we could do in our community with $12 million every year, or even if it's a little bit less, right? Let's say we back it down to a smaller project and it's $10 million. But what could we do in our community every year with those extra dollars? I mean, people want to gripe and complain about the roads and everything else. We could have pristine roads in this town if we weren't tied to all of these big projects. And I get that they need to be out there, but we do not have to spend at the absolute tip top. We are buying at the peak of the market, which is about the dumbest thing you can do in any business.
Yeah. There's 2 things, and this is an outside perspective, and I probably don't have enough to base off of another city in my life, but it feels like sometimes in North Dakota, we get a little bit of we can do it too mentality, and we overdo things.
Yeah, over-engineer.
And so we're trying to show that we can be the top, and you should always strive for the best, but there is that balance of reality of, all right, what's needed and what's the best, and find the balance there.
Well, and I don't know if you looked at the bid packet and everything like that, but there's basically 2 contractors that are in this area that are big enough to come up here and do this. And they know they're the only ones, right? And like I said the other night, the little bit about the bid that I got to look into, the bid that we were going to pick was Park Construction, and I believe they're out of Minneapolis. They came in 35% over our budget estimate from Souris River Joint Board and Ackerman Esvold. And again, I asked the question, why are our bids so low? And Jason said, well, I feel like they're a little low. Well, why are we accepting bids that we think might be a little low? First of all, our estimates, sorry. But
30% low though?
Well, yeah, low? I mean, that seems pretty drastic. And again, I'm not going to bash Ackerman Esvold. I'm sure they're doing the best they can. But anyway, circling back. So like, why do we have to limit ourselves to these 2 contractors? I know there's not a lot of them out there, and there has to be certain things. But, and I said this, once you get a contractor and he sends in a high bid and he knows you have no choice but to take it,
might go up.
Every single bid after that continues to go up. So this isn't going to be a problem that's going to solve itself. Park Construction and Wagner Construction, who are the main bidders, know damn well that we don't have anything else that we can do, and so they can bid whatever they want. The one line that stuck out to me, and again, I very briefly got to look at Park's estimate, but we had estimated that it was going to cost 1.2 million, let's say that's the number. I don't know that that's what it is, but to mobilize and bring all of their people and their equipment and everything up here. They came in $2 million over our estimate. Now, I realize sometimes contractors hide things in that mobilization number, some of their profit, some of this, some of that. But we should look at that right there as a city and laugh and say, hey, we don't need your help. Thanks. If you think it's going to cost $2 million extra to come to Minot past Fargo,
right. Yeah.
Pound sand.
Exactly. Right.
But
so if we said no to those contractors, and it seems like they're only 2, how do we find new ones?
Well, again, that's where slowing down the process may not be so bad. We are in such a hurry.
Okay.
Right? We're in such a hurry to get this done. And if all things were normalized, the economy was normal, pricing was normal, workforce was normal, I would say, yeah, we can be in a hurry. But with this, we can't.
Yeah. And if you did slow it down, then that's at least one bargaining chip that you have on the table.
Well, and as things slow down too, technology changes.
Right.
So something may come along which makes it cheaper to do this or cheaper to do that, and it may save us money. But again, nobody wants to talk about that.
The frustrating part about all this is then you go and you see these storms that are happening on the East Coast that are once in 500 years and once in whatever, just these catastrophic events. The fact of the matter is, if it's going to flood, it's going to flood. Like you
can't stop it. Right. I mean, again, we're building, how high are the walls? 30 some feet or whatever.
It's crazy.
I mean, if we have a flood that we had in levels close to 2011 or just a little bit worse, are those walls going to maintain?
Right.
Or is it going to pour right over the top of the walls? Yeah. Will it hold the majority of it back? But I mean, that's why they call a lot of these things an act of God. There is nothing you can do, unfortunately.
It takes a tornado hitting before the flood.
Yeah.
And it's all done.
It takes down all our walls, and then, hey, you got a flood. Okay. Well, that was a great $1.3 billion we spent.
Right, yeah.
So
you just can't plan against everything.
You can't.
So that's not saying you shouldn't plan at all, but it's how far down this road
But you can still plan and be fiscally responsible to the community and to the people here. Because again, and I will say this until my dying day, the other 30,000 of us that are picking this up and helping pay for this, so the 17,000 people in the valley don't have to pay these high flood insurance premiums. I agree. I would want everybody to pick up if I live down there too.
Yeah.
But we owe it to the whole community
right,
to do it to the best of our ability. And that does not mean that it's the most expensive way.
Right.
So
it's good.
Yeah. What else? You got anything else on me? City council, or were those the big things?
I think those are the big things. We talked buckets. We talked the chamber. EDC. We talked flood control. Obviously, the properties being torn down. We chatted about that. You mentioned the couple consent items that got pulled.
Yep.
One of them, there was a lot of conversation on. I'm trying to find that one right now. Oh, yes, this is it. The self-renewing lease.
Yes.
What's up with these self-renewing leases? Because there's a few of them, and now you wonder how many there are that you guys might not even touch in the next 4 years.
Well, and that just, I get why they do it, right? I mean, you see that in the business world and stuff like that. It's convenience. But auto-renewing, banks don't do that. I mean, other entities don't do that because you want to look at it every few years to make sure it's fair to both sides, right? And so again, I don't know.
You should put forth a motion, or it would have to be an ordinance that city council, other than bigger projects like flood control, that's not what I'm talking about. But on leases like this, the max term is 3 years. So then every city council has to touch them.
Yeah. I wouldn't be opposed to that. I mean, again, most of the time they're small little pieces of business that you just have to briefly touch on for a couple minutes. But the other one the other night, because it was the first time we're seeing these auto renew things, there was questions on it,
and the problem that I see with it is, so if it auto renewed for 5 years, I don't know what that auto renew process is, but auto renew sounds like it might not even go before council, or it might.
It wouldn't. If anybody is not opposed to it, whether it be the leasee or the lessor, it just auto renews for the same rate at the same 5-year period.
So 10 years from now, I mean, you're going to have a completely, most likely, there may be one person left over from the council, maybe not. 10 years is a long time to be on council. Mayor's probably going to be changed out. That'd be he's already served. That'd be a really long time for mayor. And that's just being respectful to everybody. There's no criticism. It's just 10 years is an extremely long time.
Well, and a lot of things can change in a 5 to 10 year period.
Yeah, right. So right now you have Janser who's saying, if I remember right, and respectfully, like, that's great, but you're not guaranteed to have somebody that's been on council for 15 years that remembers the setting and why and the how and all this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's hard to remember last week, let alone 15 years ago.
Exactly.
And so no shot at all against Mark. I was more speaking against myself.
Exactly.
If he has a better memory than me, I applaud him. But you're not going to see, I don't think, at least maybe I hope, some of the legacy lifetime appointments on some of these city councils and everything. I mean, again, I'll speak honestly on mine. I feel like I have a job to do, and when that job is done, I don't want to be on, sitting there all the time, because I have other things in my life I'd like to do. Now, I appreciate what I'm doing, and I'm having fun with it right now because we're fixing the things that need to be fixed. And as long as people think stuff needs to be fixed, but do I want to be on city council for like 4 terms, 16 years?
That's a long time.
I really don't. I mean, there's a lot of things that I because it takes a lot of time, and we talked about this.
You can't really take a 2-week vacation.
No. Well, I guess you could if you want to dial in remotely.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
so
fun that way.
But it takes a lot of time and a lot of prep work, and it's a good exercise that I think people in the community should do. That you should get involved.
Right. So it was good to see the chamber close to full.
Yeah, boy, when we started that meeting, because they had the Army officer who helped with the PD dog, they gave her an award, and we had Domestic Violence Awareness Month and those types of things. Yeah, there was a lot of people in there. But boy, at 10 o'clock, it was pretty sparse. Even Jill from the newspaper had left, and I was like, oh, when Jill leaves, it should be over.
Yeah, got to get to press, man. Got to get to press. So
good meeting.
Very good stuff.
Yeah,
very good stuff. I don't have anything to add on city council.
All right. So I'm going to ask you then. I'm going to put you on the spot. And I heard a little bit yesterday. Where do you stand on Measure 4 now after your debate last week?
I said I would comment on that. Well, I didn't lose any sleep over what I said yesterday, so I will stand by what I said yesterday. And so basically, I'm for Measure 4. I'm not excited about Measure 4, but I think it's going to spur the legislature into action. I don't have confidence in voting down Measure 4 and then trusting the legislature to then get something put together and through, because they've tried that before and it hasn't worked. And a comment that I made yesterday. I don't remember exactly who said it, but how is the legislature going to take it being voted down? Are they going to take it as the people actually don't want this, or are they going to take it as the people put in so much work to get on the ballot, so they do want this, they just didn't want it, how Measure 4 was done? How are they going to take it? Will reform actually happen? There's no guarantee. I think if you have it where it's something that is not the greatest, first off, things I don't like about it, I really do not like the name of it.
Yeah.
I think it's misleading, and unfair property tax sounds like property tax is going away. It's not. The state's going to fill in what's now, and there will still be the opportunity for fees to be levied, which another name for fees in that setting is property tax.
Yeah.
So that alone turns me away from it a little bit. But I think it gets the legislature into action. I think they'd have to do something. The argument to that is they didn't do anything before, so why do you think they'd do something now? Because they have to, because there are holes, because there is a problem. If they don't do something, it's going to fail. And so then the question becomes, well, maybe that's what they do just to show that it's bad and try to get another constitutional amendment. That's fine. But I think that, especially with term limits, there's going to be people that will not be willing to let that happen. That's what I think.
Yeah.
And I guess that's more of a feeling than a fact that you run off of, but I guess that question is more of a feeling than a fact too. So
you heard it here first, folks. Switzerland took a side, I think.
Switzerland took a side.
No,
no.
I agree with you. I mean, well, you don't actually give your opinion.
I try to
play
keep
it pretty neutral. So put me on this, but
you're right.
I agree with you. I mean, that becomes the big trust here. If it doesn't go through, do we trust the legislature to do what they told us they would do for the last 10 years? Oh, now we'll fix it this time. It sounds a lot like Kamala Harris to me for the last 4 years. Hey, we'll fix it as soon. But wait, you've had the whole time to fix.
And then you just get all the reasons why it can't happen. Well, there's going to continue to be reasons why it can't happen.
Yeah. And there always will be. You hear a lot of state legislators coming out and saying, yeah, we're opposed to this. Well, of course they are, because they don't want to do the work to fix the broken system that we have now. They think it's fine as long as they can continue to control it.
And something that concerns me along with that is I hear a lot of legislators coming out with plans. And to me, and so like to some that might be exciting because, there'll be an alternative action taken. I guess I don't fully buy into that. And the reason is because I'm afraid that they'll get stuck in their plan. And the difficulty has been not that people haven't wanted something to be done, is that there hasn't been agreement on what the path forward is. So if there's a bunch of plans, then does something actually get done?
Well, yeah. I mean, you're going to have 10 different plans, right? And I think, what did we say over the last 10 or 12 years? There's been like 10, 12, 15 different things that they've tried, and nothing ever happens. Right. We don't believe you anymore, Bismarck. Yeah, let's just say it. We don't believe you anymore. We want our property tax stuff fixed. Do something.
Right. So. Absolutely.
All
interesting stuff, man.
Interesting stuff, as Jonathan always says.
Measure 5 is an interesting one. I know you already said it. I think I came out strong against that one.
Well, you did. You said you didn't believe in that one, and I come on. I'm not gonna give you anything. I think that's an easy one to say. No, I'm not for it. Right, especially as a conservative type person.
Where do you stand on it? You if I remember right, you weren't necessarily against it because of revenue potential.
I'm not necessarily against it, and I'll be honest with you. I never been my thing. May never be my thing. I don't know, but it three things in my mind: the revenue potential of it. There are a lot of studies and evidence out there that show there's a lot of medicinal use for it, even if you don't have a prescription, right, for certain things and different things like that. And then the other 3 states around us have all legalized it. So whether we want it to or not,
it's around us.
Eventually it's coming
here.
Peer
pressure.
Well, peer pressure. I mean, the feds have relegated it, I believe, from a class 3 controlled substance to a class 1. So they're bringing it back up the list.
I mean, for a while they had abortion. All right.
Can you prove to me? But can you prove to me? And I'll use alcohol because that's what everybody always compares it to. Is alcohol worse than marijuana, or is marijuana worse than alcohol?
Yeah.
I would tell you, over the course of our lifetime, alcohol has ruined more lives than I would guess marijuana has. Now, I could totally be off on that stat and whatever else.
Right. And I think probably an unfair argument, or some would try to say unfair, is that probably marijuana has taken more direct lives. but that's because it's probably laced with something driven by drug
Correct.
dealers.
I mean,
and the argument would be that this would clean that up.
It would. I mean, that's the thing. You know, I believe there was a young man from Bishop Ryan a couple of years ago who had gotten, I believe, some marijuana, and it was laced with fentanyl. Absolutely tragic, unfortunate. I can't even imagine as a family how you feel if it was legalized here and you had to go buy it from a store like you do, say, in Arizona or Montana or Colorado or whatever, and they're regulated by the state government. I don't think you see that anymore because you're not having to buy that stuff off the street or whatever it is.
Do you think that people will be using it? Obviously, more openly, they will be. Which then, and I'm not well versed. Some people are probably going to say that it won't affect this, but their driving and their recreational tendencies and stuff like that. Do you think that would be more out of control?
Well,
that could cause that way.
Any more so than being drunk when you're out driving or on recreational vehicles. I think it'll be probably similar, you know, but again, they've developed, and I think they just have to start using the test that tests for THC. And so that's again where I'm going to tell you it comes down to personal choices. Just like you shouldn't drink and drive. I don't think if you're going to use marijuana, you should know you shouldn't smoke and drive or whatever.
And then lastly, do you think it's addictive?
I don't know. I mean,
okay. So
again, I'm going to go back to the personal choices. Anything can become addictive,
right?
If you use it constantly and determine in your head that you need it.
Yep. That argument kind of bothers me with it when people say it's not addictive. It's like, all right, so did you eat today? Did you drink caffeine today?
Yeah.
You don't even realize it, but you're addicted to caffeine.
Yeah.
You don't realize it, but you're addicted to food. You don't always eat food because you need it. Like there's so much that we do that did you just pull up your phone again? Like you're addicted to your phone as well.
Social media. Yeah. I mean, all that stuff.
You're addicted to so much in your life and you don't realize it because your life depends on it, but it doesn't negatively affect your life. So food does to a point, but we don't go and call out the addictive traits that we have.
Right.
So
you know what I'm addicted to? I'm addicted to trying to save this city some money.
All right, let's do it.
All right, guys, that's the end of the podcast. Thanks for joining us today. Great conversations as always, Jonathan.
So good, man.
See you guys next week.